No, there's no mistakes on the Uncle Tim show. So, a couple things, when Jim left the States, I don't know if I could do the same thing. I left the States, but it was in the Navy. And all granted, I had a few people yelling at me, but I always had a place locked in to sleep and food on the table. Now, a different story with Jim. He left in 2012 for a year. And what do you know? 5 years, 3 months later, he is back in town. So I'm going to turn Jim's mic on here. I've got a couple. Well, actually, we've got more material than we can cover all night here. But hey, Jim, testing 1, 2, 3.
Yep, you got me on there.
Jim is in the studio, and I'll tell you what's exciting about Vintage Radio. We've got people listening probably down under, and in Jim, you got a friend in Seoul. So,
yeah, I'm not sure if my boy Doug has tuned in to listen yet, but I told him to keep an ear out for me.
Hey, Doug, I hope you're listening. Let's see, I'm going to adjust that down just a little bit. Anyway, to set the record straight, if anybody looked on Facebook at those pictures advertising the interview, you saw Jim and Uncle Tim doing a pull-up. Well, I needed some help. I just made it look good, didn't I, Jim? I was just hanging there like I was really doing a pull-up. Jim probably could have wrapped off 40 of them. But
maybe a couple more than you. I don't know. You held your own for a bit there.
But we have, Jim has managed to get his mother and I down under a few times. Let's just start out with, you left in the fall of 2012. What was the reason? What was the catalyst? What got you in the mood to bail out of the country?
Well, I'd have to say that I was thinking about it for a very long time. It had been a plan that I was working on for many years. From a pretty early age, I'd actually have to say that growing up in Erie probably had a fair bit to do with it. From a pretty early age, I realized that, Erie isn't all the world has to offer. I knew there was a lot more out there to see and that I wanted to be a part of that. I probably started to take it a bit more seriously when I was about 18, maybe 20. When I was in college, I started making plans to get out of the country. I didn't expect to be there for 5 years, to be away for as long as I was, but that's the way that it worked out, and no regrets. I'm happy that I was able to do that, and happy that I get to share my experience here on the Uncle Tim Show.
That's right. It was supposed to be a 1-year trip. Now, I never worried too much about you getting home. Your mother did a little bit more than I did.
Sure.
I was using you for an excuse to get down under. Hey, we got to go back. Jim's there. How did you come to pick Australia first?
Well, it started out when I started planning to leave the country. I started thinking about, my sister, your daughter, studied for a semester at, I believe it was Macquarie University in Sydney, all the way back in 2002. And so ever since then, we've had family friends in and around the country. So I decided that would be a good place for me to start. I'd have someone to look after me while I was getting my feet wet and figuring out how to learn how to live in another country. And once I started doing a little bit of research, that's when I learned about the working holiday program that exists in Australia. It'll grant Americans and Canadians and most European countries have the working holiday agreement with them, where you can spend 12 months in the country and work casually to support yourself along the way. So it just seemed like a great opportunity for me to do a bit of traveling and not go broke while I was doing it.
It took a lot of guts. You had a little bit of a lifeline when you first got over there. Big shout out to our friend Barry and Julie.
That's right. Barry and Julie looked after me. They were the first, my first crash pad in Australia. I spent a week and a half maybe at their place. Well, I figured out how to open a bank account, how to get a cell phone, how to, I had to make a plan as far as what direction I wanted to go and when. I arrived with not much, couple of bags full of stuff, too much stuff as a matter of fact, but sorted the rest out along the way, and they sent me on my way when I was ready. So big thanks to them. Couldn't have done it without them, really.
And you're saying too much stuff now. It didn't look like you had all that much with you. What did you carry in your backpack?
Well, I definitely did have too much to start out with. I shipped an entire, I didn't ship it, I actually stored it at Barry and Julie's place, an entire duffel bag full of clothes that was, it was way overkill what I took. I didn't need all the stuff I needed. I learned to travel pretty light. For the better part of the last 5 years, I was living with 2 pairs of pants and maybe 5 or 8 shirts, something like that is about all I need. As long as I had access to a washing machine, that's about all I needed. A couple of things that I couldn't have done without, though. I always had some books and some journals in my bag. Those are heavy; they're not easy to carry around, but I still read paperbacks, so I like to have a stack of those with me at all times. And the other item I'd say was my Bluetooth speaker. I'm a music guy. I like to listen to music. I like to have the opportunity to take my music with me when I'm on the road. So
and we are going to get to that because I have a feeling we have a difference in tastes on music. I know it for a fact. But now you carried a laptop with you.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. I had a MacBook with me at all times, and yeah, it actually died once along the road, but I got a replacement shipped out. It's not a light piece of equipment, but I used it every single day. I used it. I took it with me on little side trips. Probably took it with me a couple of times even when I was camping, just to make sure I could book a place to stay or do a little research when I was on the road. It's useful if I wanted to upload photos when I was on the road. Yeah, it was good to have with me at all times.
When we saw you in New Zealand, you had 2 backpacks, front and back. How much weight do you think you were carrying at the height of dragging books and everything else around?
Well, gosh, the height, I couldn't tell you what the height was. That would have been before I left to come to Australia because, like I said, I had an entire additional duffel bag in addition to the 2 backpacks that I was carrying. But my average, I'd say I got it down to about, the most I was ever carrying in the midst of my travels was probably about 25 kilograms, which I'm going to have to convert that to maybe 55 pounds, maybe 60 pounds, something like that.
That's right. You have gone metric on us while you've been gone.
More or less, yeah.
Everything's been in centigrade when you're talking, and I'm not very good about doing the math, but you're pretty much metric.
That one still trips me up. The Celsius versus Fahrenheit does still trip me up from time to time. But yeah, kilograms and kilometers, that's my life as of late.
We'll get back to music, but so you're in Australia first, and how long were you there? Your first time.
It was 1 year. Yeah, it was the 12-month working holiday visa, as I mentioned. So I spent the first 10 weeks traveling down the East Coast, more or less. That's where most of the populace is concentrated in Australia. So 10 weeks on the East Coast, down and around over to Adelaide, and then I finally settled in Melbourne, down in the south. And before anyone brings it up, or before you ask me, Dad, it is pronounced Melbourne. It's not Melbourne. That's how you read it. But
I do say Melbourne on the air lots of times, but sometimes just for the heck of it, I will go Melbourne.
I would think you would probably raise an eyebrow when you say Melbourne, but when you live in Australia, that's what it's called. That's what you call it. It's the city of Melbourne. So that was my home for about 7 months, I would say. The rest of the time I was on the road traveling, but Melbourne is where I was living and where I was working. So that was more or less my home.
Now, a lot of your days were spent in hostels, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. More than I'd care to admit, actually.
Every time I hear the word hostel, I think of that movie. I think it's a horror stories.
Yeah, they weren't all like that. Some of them were like that, but not all of them.
So some of them pretty decent.
Some of them are decent. Yeah, boy. Some of the better ones, when I was in Japan, some of the hostels were immaculate. That was no problems there. Australia and New Zealand, those are both very expensive countries, and so generally when I was making my way around, I was staying in some of the cheaper places, some of the cheapest possible places. And we're talking bottom of the barrel hostels in Australia and New Zealand. You can get some rough spots. Nothing terrifying, nothing that's life threatening or whatever. But a little dirt and a little grime, and sometimes there's no such thing as a sharp knife in the kitchen. Sometimes the shower leaks from the second floor onto the first floor kitchen, and that's not good for anybody.
How's the internet access? Probably not too good.
Not as good as you want it to be. Yeah. All hostels will have, they've all got Wi-Fi for you, but it doesn't always work. It's not always great. It's you can't always find Wi-Fi at cafes or restaurants. Like, it's not as common over there as I would say it is in the States to be able to pop into a coffee shop and use the Wi-Fi if you want.
Can you just show up at a hostel, or you have to book those in advance? Logistically?
It depends. If you want to play it safe, you book ahead. Sometimes if you get screwed or you don't plan ahead, you're going to have to just show up and hope for the best. And that did happen to me a couple of times. Sometimes you get surprised. I remember I was staying in Sydney. I'd been at a place downtown for a couple of days, and I went to extend my stay. Next thing I knew, they told me, okay, sorry, we're all booked up. And it was an enormous hostel as well. But there was some event on in the city that I didn't take into account and I wasn't aware of. So I had to hop on a bus to a different part of town with some German friends that I had made. Hostel wasn't answering their phone, but it was the only one available or the only one nearby that we weren't sure if it was booked up or not. So I took a bus for 30 minutes out to this hostel, fingers crossed, and got the last room in the place. So, you just kind of have to hope you get lucky, and if not, you have to make friends along the road and hope one of them will help look after you, give you a place to stay, give you a couch to crash on, whatever it takes. More often than not, though, I was all right, and I was prepared and booked ahead.
5 years on the road. Did you ever have to sleep on a bench with some newspapers over you?
No, I don't think I ever resorted to outright homelessness. I've heard stories from some fellow travelers, sometimes from people who've had to spend the night in the park, or, someone who had to sleep all night at a 24-hour McDonald's. It's not ideal, but sometimes that's what you got to do. Or a bus station, train station, whatever. Sometimes you'll just catch a couple hours of sleep, lean on your backpack so no one takes anything from you, and hope for the best. But no, I was pretty good. I think I slept indoors almost every night.
Everybody that's listened to my show thinks I'm gone total Australian because I talk about it a lot. I play a lot of Australian bands. I do love the place, but a little bit about it. I've not really talked much about Australia, and Australia I think is just slightly smaller than the United States. Is that correct?
Yeah, just a little bit smaller than the continental 48 states, yeah.
And I'm going to quiz you now.
Mm-hmm.
Australia only has 6 states. Name?
Incorrect. Is it a trick question? Because there's 7 states.
I was thinking it was 6.
Did I pass?
You passed then, yeah. 7 states. All right, name the 7 states.
You've got Western Australia, South Australia, New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria, Tasmania, and the ACT, Australian Capital Territory, is technically a state. That's where Canberra, the seat of government, sits. So it's not much of a state, but it is technically a state.
Like our D.C.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, a lot of people, our friend Barry over there, he was telling me how mad the people in Tasmania get for being, people think it's a separate entity. There's even been maps drawn up of Australia that don't have Tasmania on it. And it is a state. And I know we'll get to Tasmania too, because I know you liked it there.
I did. I had a great time in Tasmania. It's just a little runt of an Australian state down there, which, as you said, often gets forgotten, but it's an absolutely beautiful place. And highly recommend it. If anyone's in Australia, definitely check out Tasmania.
So we've got these 7 states, and I was shocked at the prices down there. And
me too.
Yeah. I remember when you first got there and found out I think you told us a hot dog was $7. I mean,
12. I found a $12 hot dog. That was a special outside of some little street side restaurant or something, and I couldn't believe that was their special. Yeah.
And Australia, super expensive. I mean, some examples: a pint of beer, what, $6, $7?
No, $12 as well. Maybe $10 is closer.
I was
average.
just throwing the credit card. I never looked at it.
Yeah,
so,
that's good. That's it was great. You came to visit me.
Yeah. Coffee?
No, more or less the same as here in the States. $4 for a cup of coffee is pretty standard, so that's not too different.
I swear I saw a case of beer for like $160. But pack of cigarettes down under, what was it?
$25. Yeah, about $1 a cigarette down there. Yeah.
So they discourage it big time down there. Cigarettes are under the counter. You have to ask for them. They aren't out in the open, and they have the nastiest pictures you'd ever want to see on it.
They do try and scare you off a bit with some disgusting photographs. So
So it's super expensive. I remember driving down the road, and all of a sudden it turned into gravel. And then Barry was explaining to us, well, here in the States, comparable, we got 350 million people. Close.
Yeah, something like that. We're getting there anyway.
And there's 24 million plus.
Yeah, that's right.
For that big area. So the tax rates are high. I mean, you don't have the population to support everything. So you're going to get taxed for it. And speaking of population, that's one thing I was shocked at. Everything closes early. They can't stay, can't pay the overhead to stay open all night, because they don't have the people to come in. If you don't have a place to eat, like by 5 o'clock, You're going to have to look for a McDonald's or something.
5 o'clock might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but yeah, I mean, even restaurants in the city, even in Melbourne where I was staying, we got shut down from a couple of restaurants trying to go in at 8 p.m. That's relatively reasonable dinner time in my opinion, but hey, kitchen closes at 9, we're not taking any more seating after 8 o'clock, so yeah, you're right. And if you get out of the city and you're in some of those little outback towns or some of those little coastal towns that are just don't see a lot of tourism because they're not destinations, then yeah, you're right. Maybe 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, the kitchen will close. You don't have a bite to eat. Maybe the grocery store is closed as well. So you better be prepared when you're on the road for that type of thing.
That kind of rolls. It's like Erie. After a certain time, there's not much going on.
Yeah, I suppose so. I wonder if we ever stayed in any, or I ever stayed in any town smaller than Erie along the way. I bet I did.
Probably.
I couldn't tell you what they were, though.
So, one other thing that you mentioned to me that I think the listeners would be interested in, down under in Australia, voting is mandatory.
Yeah, that's right. At least the last I knew.
I remember Barry saying this.
When we were talking about the 7 Australian states, or how many states there are. Is Tasmania actually a state? Yes, it is. One of the ones that people tend to want to throw in there is the Northern Territory, massive tract of land in north central Australia. It's where the city of Darwin is, I believe. I hope I'm not wrong on that one. I think that's where Darwin is in the Northern Territory. But it's not technically a state, so it's not subject to the same federal rules that the rest of the Australian states are. It is a territory, so I don't know exactly what laws do govern that particular tract of land, but they're not the same as the rest of the Australian states.
And it's the biggest, isn't it?
No. Western Australia is.
Western is the biggest.
Yeah, massive, yeah.
How much Vegemite did you eat while you were there?
A fair bit, actually. I don't know if anyone out there has ever tried Vegemite, but it can be quite delicious, as a matter of fact. So it did grow on me. It's an acquired taste, that's for sure.
I just never acquired it. I took a taste, and I remember giving Anna, your sister, a big scoopful, telling her how good it was, and she's still holding that one against me. But and what else? Something that's real comparable to it?
Marmite. I'm a Marmite guy. I prefer Marmite. I encountered that in New Zealand when I was in New Zealand, and I believe that's originally an English product that comes out of the UK, Marmite. So that was imported, and they eat a lot of that down there, and it's just a little bit sweeter than that tangy, sour Vegemite taste that you're used to.
I tell you what. Everybody knows I love Australia, and I have to admit, the last time we did come down there, best vacation I ever took, traveling the Great Ocean Road. I think it's listed as one of the top 10 drives in the world, and I know why. Now, you've been on it a couple of times.
A couple of times, yeah.
You were traveling with some...
Well, that was one of the first road trips that I took in my travels. Some Swedish guys is what you were looking for there. I met a couple of Swedes when I was in Sydney. At a hostel. Actually, it was the hostel that I mentioned before that I took a bus to, hoping they had an open room because all the hostels in the city proper were filled up. I just wound up at this random hostel, which turned out to be an excellent stay right across the road from the beach. That's where I met these 3 Swedish guys that were traveling as well. They happened to have a car. I made friends with them. They said, "Hey, we're going to do the Great Ocean Road in a couple of weeks." I said, "Okay, I'm going to be in Adelaide." They said, "We'll meet you there." And I hopped in the car with them, and we did the Great Ocean Road together, and it was absolutely, gorgeous experience. Beautiful beaches. Had lunch on the beach. Just, did a little hiking. It was beautiful. You saw it. The coast is amazing.
I saw it, and the trouble is with Australia for me is it's like you're saying you're going to the United States and you want to see it all. How long would that take? Yeah, you can never see it all. So
what, to see all of Australia?
Oh, there's so many places.
Boy, I couldn't tell you. And you ask an Australian, and they're going to say you don't stand a chance. Same as an American would tell you that. There's so much of my own country I haven't seen, and that's one of the comments that I got often when I was abroad. When I was in Europe, as well as when I was in Australia and New Zealand, people would say, they'd ask me, what are you doing here, and where have you been? What have you seen? And they'd say, wow, you've seen way more of my own country than I've ever seen. And I'd say, that's just,
that's the way it works.
That's the way it works. Your country is more interesting to me than my own country, I would say. I've always wanted to, it's just, you want to see the other side of the world. You take for granted what's in your own backyard. Having said that, there is a lot more of the United States that I would like to see now. I've got a greater appreciation for all of the natural beauty in my own country. There's a lot of traveling I'd like to do here, but there's something about the other side of the world that just is really appealing.
How did you do it? You were on the road for over 5 years. You were paying off school loans and supporting yourself for 5 years. How'd you do it?
Yeah, that's correct. Well, for the first For the year, a solid year, maybe year and a half before I left the country, I had this plan in the back of my head. I knew I wanted to go abroad. I was pretty sure I wanted to go to Australia. I knew it was an expensive country. I thought I'd better put some money in the bank before I do it. So I built up decent savings before I ever left the country, because, last thing you want to do is run out of money when you're abroad. And have to call your parents or whatever it is you do.
Yeah,
I didn't want that to happen.
You knew we'd hang you out.
Yeah,
they'd
leave me out to dry. Absolutely, I always do. So I saved up a bit of money. I knew I was going to want to stay abroad for a while, at least a year. I wanted to have a little financial cushion to do it. So I did that, and then like I said, I traveled for about 10 weeks when I first arrived, making my way down the east coast of Australia. And then once I stopped in Melbourne, I wasn't totally out of money at that point, but I was running on fumes, by the time I got down there from all the travels that I had done. So I decided I needed to look for work. I'd worked at cafes all throughout college, and Melbourne has an enormous booming coffee industry, and there's always a demand for people who can make a decent cup of coffee, and it's an easy job for a traveler. You're not going to stick around for a long time, so it's easy to pick up casual work. Hospitality is a casual gig that's easy to get into. So I did that for about 6 months. I found a cafe that wanted to put me in the coffee machine for a little while, and and they paid me all right to work down there.
It is high-end coffee.
Melbourne especially. Melbourne is that's one of the things I definitely miss since I've been back, is the coffee and the brunch scene as well. Melbourne has some very competitive and very extraordinary cafes, and they do charge a premium, but the product is amazing. So I do miss that. I don't get that in Erie.
You laughed at me a lot because I would say, just give me a giant mug of what, give me some big cappuccino. And these little things just weren't making it for me.
Yeah,
but,
sorry, the little 4-ounce and 6-ounce cappuccino sippers, didn't do it for you,
It's so expensive down under, but like you say, minimum wage is...
Boy, I'm not sure exactly. When I was there, and it varies state to state, I believe, in Australia. So minimum wage, I think, is roughly between $16 and $18 an hour, something like that. So it's very expensive to live there, as Dad has mentioned several times, and you're going to notice that if you go there on vacation. But if you're going to live there for a little while and you pick up a job, it's going to more than offset the difference. You can make decent money there. Even working a casual gig in a cafe or a bar or a restaurant, like a lot of travelers do and like I was doing, you're going to make a decent wage. So even part-time, it's going to help offset that cost of the expense of living. So
tons of travelers.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Any one country more than the other that you ran into?
Germans run the east coast of Australia. I'm exaggerating, of course, but there is an extraordinary amount of German travelers. Young kids, especially, students doing gap years, 18, 19-year-old kids who just finished high school, haven't started university yet, or kids who just finished college and don't want to start working yet. For whatever reason, Germany seems to encourage their youth to take a gap year more so than any other country. Lots of other countries as well, but Germany was by far the majority.
Was that also in New Zealand, more Germans?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say so as well.
So you spent a year in Australia and then headed over to New Zealand.
That's right, I did. And I did 1 year there as well. Yep.
That was quite an experience for us to drive. I'm trying to think. I've got a note here somewhere, but we put in 2,500 miles in Australia, in like
I think we did more in New Zealand.
More in New
actually.
Zealand because we covered both islands.
That's right.
I probably have that backwards, like 2,500 miles in New Zealand.
I remember I saw your little note that you wrote. Yeah, and I think it was about 1,500 in Australia. Now, are we in miles or kilometers, Dad? You got to tell me.
No, I converted it over to miles
okay,
for the listeners. Yeah,
I
but
gotcha.
It is definitely different. Steering wheel on the wrong side, driving on the wrong side, everything kilometers. That's my only excuse for getting 2 speeding tickets the last time there. 12 miles over between the 2 tickets, and it was over $600. Ouch.
Yeah, one of them I think was 3 over, right?
3 over for $211.
Boy, I'm sorry about that. They must be hurting for those tax dollars, or trying to get money any way they can. I'm not sure.
And they tell me if I had been a commercial vehicle, it would have been at least a double.
Yikes.
Hey, did you get homesick? 5 years.
Yeah, from time to time, I would say I missed certain things from home, people from home as well, family and friends would be the biggest thing I got homesick about. But I would say it was always offset by, the adventure, I guess. It's sometimes you get homesick, but it's always worth it, I guess I would say, to be abroad and to be away from home and be experiencing new new things. The worst homesickness I ever experienced, actually, I don't even know if it technically qualifies as homesickness, but my first 3 days that I was in Australia, the first 3 days after I left our friends Barry and Julie's place and was on the road on my own, and I didn't know a soul, and I was in a foreign country, and I didn't know what I was doing or where I was going or why I was there. That was a bit rough. That was a little, it was, that was a rough start to the journey. But, as soon as I made some friends and started talking to people who were in much the same situation I was, it was a piece of cake.
I did get to meet some of your friends, some fantastic people out
That's
there.
Right. That's
really
right.
Some fantastic people. Hopefully you'll run into them again. But like I was talking with Jim, you run into somebody like that and you say, see you later. And really should say, have a good life, because you probably won't see a lot of these people ever again. Maybe you will, stay in touch with them. But we had a good laugh about what Jim missed the most. And we got to talking about when Australians come here to the United States, the amount of choices that we have here. You go into a store and you want to buy a box of cereal, there's 200 different kinds of cereal in there. You can't decide. We're just overwhelmed. Down under, totally different.
Yeah, I missed that sugary cereal when I was abroad. I'll tell you what, there's only so much oat flakes and muesli I can take.
Yeah, you can only be so healthy so long. Well, tell Leo, was it Fruit Loop? No.
I believe you're referring to the Lucky Charms.
The Lucky
incident.
Charms story.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I miss sugary cereal. I miss Cinnamon Toast Crunch was always a favorite of mine. I can't find that abroad. There's no Cookie Crisp in Australia. That's that's a shame. No Reese's Puffs.
What is that for all of us fat Americans or what?
Hey, I don't know how fat I am, but I love that stuff.
Yeah,
so,
okay. Well, you can eat anything and never gain.
I was, so I found myself I was in like a specialty candy store one time, just poking around, and I saw a box of Lucky Charms, one box of Lucky Charms on a top shelf, and I got really excited.
In a candy store.
Yeah, in a candy store, and it turns out it was one of their specialty imports. I got really excited. Hey, I actually can eat Lucky Charms here in Australia. Took a little bit of a closer look and found out it was selling for $14 a box. So I wasn't able to pull the trigger on that one, unfortunately. I went without Lucky Charms for a full 5 years.
Who would have thought Lucky Charms would be a specialty item? Well,
that's right. Appreciate what you got, folks.
We were talking about hostels, but you spend a lot of time in shared spaces.
Yeah, share houses. Yeah, absolutely.
Could you even guess how many nights you might have spent in a hostel? Maybe not.
Boy,
in 5 years.
I couldn't even estimate that. I have no idea.
But shared spaces had to have been fun, meeting new people.
Yeah, hit or miss. Like a lot of times, so a lot of places that I stayed, if I decided I wanted to stay for more than a few days or more than a week, if I decided I wanted to find work there, for example, I did that in Wellington, I did that in Auckland, I did that in Dunedin, all in New Zealand. I stayed about 3 months in each of those locations. And, so if you want to stay a little bit longer than a week, maybe it's economical to get a share house. So you'll look around online, find maybe somebody's posted a room available for rent, and go check it out. Sometimes it's just a place to crash. It's usually worth it money-wise, and sometimes it's just all right. But sometimes it feels a little bit like a home, Sometimes you get along with the people that live there. Sometimes they're long-term residents, and they're there the whole time you are, and you become friends with them. That happened a couple of times with me, and I'm very grateful for those experiences. My home away from home experiences, those were really nice. Yeah,
I gotta admit, just judging by the friends that I met the couple times I went down there, must have been great living in those share houses. Super nice people from all over the world. We were talking before came up to the studio, and what do you say to people that are afraid to leave their own country? You had some great experiences on the road. Were you ever really afraid for your life?
No, not really, not really. I mean, there were some rough times, and maybe sometime when I, ran out of money, or my hostel was crappy, or, I didn't have any friends in a particular city and I was a new arrival, there are times when everything's not going great, and, you miss home a little bit, or you think, what am I doing here? But, boy, what was the question you initially?
What do you say to people that don't want to leave the borders, that are afraid to go to another country? I mean, you were never really afraid for your life. You had one little... You thought you were being led astray.
Led astray is the perfect way to put it, yes. The night I arrived in Rome, the first place I stayed in Europe was Rome. I flew into Rome, and this was a bit of poor planning on my part. My flight got in, I flew from Tokyo, and I arrived at about 10:30 p.m. I didn't get out of the airport till maybe 11:30. And I had just booked a cheap place to stay near a train station that I was relatively confident I could get to with public transport. Unfortunately, because I arrived so late at night, I had to catch the second to last train and then transfer to the last train in order to get out to where I was staying at this train station. First train was a little bit delayed, so I missed my second train. So turns out I'm stranded at a train station in Italy. I don't speak Italian. I've got two backpacks. I've got 50 pounds worth of stuff on my back. I don't know where I'm going. Don't speak the language. And this is before I even I didn't have a phone at that point. I didn't have a phone or a working SIM card, so it was pretty out of luck. Helpful fellow walks down the hallway, sees me not knowing what to do or where to go. I told him I'm trying to get to this particular train station. He said, "Hey, that's easy. Just take the bus." I said, "Okay. Where's the bus?" He said, "Oh, that's fine. Come on, follow me. I'll show you where the bus is." All right. Okay. All right. This guy's going to help me out. Okay. So we walk a couple of blocks, and keep walking. We're not in the best part of town. Like I said, I'm looking for a cheap place to stay, a place to dump my stuff. I need to do a little more planning as far as Europe is concerned. I'm relatively unprepared. And I start to realize as we walk block after block after block that, man, I am the easiest target in the world right now. Like I said, 50 pounds of stuff worth on my back. I don't speak the language. It's pretty obvious to this guy and to anyone else that encounters me that I am clueless and pretty helpless. This not being the best part of town, I see trash lining the streets, flickering street lamps. I start to get a little bit worried. I think, where is this guy taking me and what is he going to do with me when he gets there? So I start to get a little concerned. I start to lag back a little bit, hang back, grip my backpack a little bit tighter and start to think, what's my plan of action? What's my plan of escape? And then he says, "Hey, there you go. Look right ahead. That's your train, or that's your bus stop right there. There's a bunch of people standing on the street corner. It appears to be well lit. There's other people hanging out there, so I think, okay, I'm safe."
Oh, it all turned out good.
It all turned out okay. That was that was my only close call, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, you were telling me that, you never really feared for much. And what I found, I swear, the Australians are the friendliest people in the world. Although the last time down there, all anybody wanted to ask me about was Trump.
Yeah, I do.
Anybody that I ran into, what do you think of your new president? What do you think of Trump? But you know me. I can walk up to talk to anybody, and 2 minutes later, I'll have their email address, their cell phone number, and a letter in the mail to them. So
that's true. You always impress me with that.
So things you missed the most. I don't know. Did we cover that kind of?
I've got two answers to that, both culinary. I missed decent quality Mexican food. Because that is something that's pretty hard to find in that part of the world.
No Mexican food.
Some Mexican food, but it's very expensive and it's not cheap and it's not not always up to snuff. I would say. So I missed that. And the portion sizes also. No one really does it like Americans as far as portion sizes are concerned.
It is over the top here.
It might be over the top, but I did come to miss that. Skinny guy or not, I came to miss the giant portions. So I do appreciate that about being at home and going out to eat.
Miss the big portions and I tell you what, you turned us on to some different food. You learned a lot on the road.
Well, that was the other thing I was going to say is, okay, it was tough to find, Mexican, that's some of my favorite cuisine. I love a good taco, burrito, enchiladas, all that stuff. You can't find that down under. But what you can find down under is excellent Indian food. Indian food is amazing.
I'd never had it till we went out with you down there.
Yeah, that was in Christchurch, I believe. I was happy to expose you to that because, and actually my last share house in Melbourne was right down the alley from an award-winning Indian restaurant. I used to take out from there, once a week. It was amazing. So they made up for it with quality Indian food and quality Thai food as well.
We got a chance to have some of that too.
It helps if you like spice, as far as both of those cuisines are concerned. If you like it a little bit spicy, then you're in luck. If not, maybe be careful. But,
I always had to be careful. You know me. I can't even put cinnamon on my milk toast. So I do. When you go on vacation, you don't want to scrimp. But if you want to just have an idea of like Australia, we would go out and the three of us have a dinner with maybe a drink or two. It'd always be over $100.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
So you just got to be prepared for that. So save your frequent flyer miles and get your flights for free, and then it's not so bad while you're down there.
Yeah, so take a cue from Uncle Tim and use those frequent flyer miles wisely.
I know how to game the system. I'm going to start a little class on the side. Okay, a year in Australia. We'll jump back to that. A year in New Zealand. What'd you like the best between the two countries, or could you not pick?
Oh boy, I hate to pick sides, especially if Barry and Julie are out there listening in
Oh
Australia.
man, yeah. You know how those Australians will say their beer is the best, and then the New Zealanders say, no, ours is the best. You know.
Yeah, and who did truly invent the flat white coffee? That is a point of contention as well.
Really?
Yeah. They fight about that, I think, to this day.
The flat white coffee.
I don't know the true answer to that. You know, they're both different. They're very different, I would say. You know, people would ask me that when I was on the road, fellow travelers that were maybe in one wanting to visit the other. And I would always tell them that Australia was a better place to live. Australia's a better place if you want to stay there and you want to live there and you want to work there. Wages are a bit higher. You know, Australia's got more to offer in terms of big cities. New Zealand doesn't have a lot to offer by way of cities. Australia has Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne. You know, it's got some, you know, Perth. I never made it out to Perth on the west coast, but I hear that's beautiful as well. If you want to live and you want to make money, go to Australia. That was always my recommendation. New Zealand, if you want to travel, you want to go on vacation, you want to see some beautiful, amazing landscape, absolutely go to New Zealand. Also, it really helps that it's a very small geographical area. You can cover the entire country, and you know we did a good portion of New Zealand in just those, you know, not even 3 weeks that we had down there. We did a fair bit of the South Island and a lot of the North Island as well. So you know, New Zealand is very easy to get around as long as you can drive on the wrong side of the road.
And you're going in circles, because I remember those roads. Very curvy, wavy.
Yeah, and the roundabouts as well. You got to learn how to navigate a roundabout.
And yeah, we did see a fair amount. One of the highlights were those sand dunes, over 300 feet high. People surfing these sand dunes.
Yeah,
I can't remember where that was.
It was all the way up north. I don't know exactly. Near Cape Reinga is the on the northern tip of the North Island. So it was up in that direction.
Strangest things, both places. Those bubbly, you know, all the volcanic activity in New Zealand. Australia's got all, you know, the 7 deadliest critters on Earth, 12, I don't know, whatever it is, but very exotic, both places. So, yeah. And then after a stint, we got to see you in New Zealand. Then, did you go to Indonesia in between, or did you go right back to Australia?
Well, and we skipped we skipped one as well. When I was in Australia, my first year in Australia, I did take 2 weeks off to go up to Malaysia and Singapore as well. So that was the little side trip that I took. And then back to Australia, then over to New Zealand, and then from New Zealand, I decided to pop back over to Australia. I decided I missed Melbourne. I had a pretty good quality of life in Melbourne, and I still had some friends over there from my first visit. So I headed back to Melbourne. It was shortly after arriving back in Melbourne that I went up to Indonesia for a couple of weeks. Yeah, right. To answer your question.
That's with your friend Doug from Seoul, right?
Yeah. Not from Seoul, from right here in our home state of Illinois. But yeah.
Sorry, Doug. I know you're listening.
He's very proud of his hometown, Barrie, Illinois. By the way, yeah.
I'm not sure where that's at. I'll have to look that up.
Southeast of here, but it's central Illinois, more or less, and actually smaller than Erie, believe it or not.
You guys have been friends since college days.
Yeah, since freshman in college, going on about 12 years now, I would say, something like that. Anyway, yeah, so after my year in Australia and my year in New Zealand, I hadn't seen him for a couple of years. Actually, for 3 years, because he had spent a year in South Korea prior to my leaving. He'd been in South Korea for 3 years, and I'd been traveling for a couple of years myself, so we decided, we're going to meet up in Indonesia, which is more or less in the middle of both of us, from where I was in Melbourne and where he was in South Korea. So, yeah.
And if I remember correctly, you might have drank some bad water there.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it was, but yes, Bali is beautiful and inexpensive and amazing. But be careful. I don't know if I drank some water, if I was not careful enough brushing my teeth, if I had some ice in my drink, what it was. They've got a term for it over there. They call it Bali belly. You know, when your stomach can't quite take whatever microbes are swimming around in the water. Because, yeah, I did get extraordinarily sick about 2 days into my Bali experience. So,
I always heard, Doc always said Bali was one of his favorite places.
Oh, man, It was absolutely gorgeous. It's just a shame I didn't get to enjoy it quite as much as I would have otherwise. But a couple of days after I got sick, it caught up with my friend Doug, and he got extraordinarily sick as well. So, you know, just got to be careful.
So that was in between that little visit. You know, then we went over to New Zealand for a year, and then back to Australia.
Then back to Australia, yeah.
For quite a stint. One thing I see a note that I wrote myself. You couldn't have Scotcheroos if you know everybody desserts down there because Aussies have not heard of butterscotch.
God, does everyone out there know what Scotcheroos are? I know what Scotcheroos are, but is that a common... I've only seen them inside our household. I don't know.
I think it might be. But anyway, you can't make anything with butterscotch chips because you couldn't find any.
No, that's true. No butterscotch in Australia. God,
not even on the top shelf next to the Lucky Charms?
Let me tell you, I looked for it. I was really craving some Scotcheroos when I was down there. You can trust me on that one, but it's nowhere to be found.
So, I just see my notes. We drove 2,200 miles in New Zealand and 1,500 in Australia. Sure. Yeah, a lot of time on the road. Fuel's all in... Liters, yeah. Converting everything. Fuel's very expensive. But like you say, take twice as much money and half as much clothes, right?
That's the rule I was always told, and boy, that is absolutely true.
So, okay, where do we want to go with this interview next? Favorite places? I know we're going to talk about when you finally decided to come home. Was it you were on the road for 5 weeks?
8 weeks altogether.
8 weeks? How many countries?
8 weeks, 9 countries it ended up being. So,
just the logistics. Flights.
Yeah, I started out I was pretty prepared at the beginning. I knew what I wanted to do and where I wanted to go. And slowly, as time went on, I decided to change my plans up a little bit along the way, and I became progressively less organized. So anyway, where I think you were kind of going with this is I decided to take the long way home. I knew I wanted to be home for Christmas time. I believe it was December 22nd. I flew back into O'Hare. But I left at the end of October. I saw my friend Doug. I spent a week in South Korea, 8 days there. I did 2 weeks in Japan, and then I did 5 weeks in Europe, traipsing all over Europe. So I did 7 of those 9 countries were European countries that I saw in the last. So I did 7 European countries in 5 weeks, which, yes, it was exhausting.
I was going to say that's why you needed 48 hours of sleep when you got back. But you're
at least.
The little kids didn't give you a break.
That's right.
You were pretty impressed with Seoul. It's a massive city.
Yeah, Seoul is incredible. My bus ride from the airport, I think from Incheon Airport, was it took me an hour and a half just to get near my friend's place. And I felt like I drove through about 3 cities on the way. It's a massive, massive metropolitan area and densely packed as well. I think, there's about 25 million people in Seoul. It's one of the largest cities in the world now. It's behind Tokyo, but not
more
much
than
else.
The country of Australia in one city.
That's exactly right, yeah.
Unbelievable, yeah.
Yeah. No, Seoul was a blast because, as I said, I saw my friend Doug just a couple of times over the course of those 5 years. And finally, at the end of my trip there, I got to see him in his element. He's been living in Seoul, and he's still in Seoul now. Been there for 6 years, and it's more or less his home. And he moved to Seoul from, as I said, Barrie, Illinois, a town smaller than Erie, and now he's living in one of the largest cities in the world. And he's more or less made it his home, and he loves it there. And it was great to see him in his element and have him play tour guide a little bit and have him show me around. That was a great time.
He is so at home. He is now brewing his own
makgeolli.
You better, Doug. You better save me some of that. I've never tried makgeolli, which is
It's a rice wine. Yeah, a delicious Korean rice wine that he turned me on to over there. And I gotta say, he's gonna feel. I feel like he's gonna feel like this whole interview is about him at this point. I don't know if he's listening, but he took me out to try makgeolli. He took me to some of his favorite bars, and I sampled this. And enjoyed it quite a bit, and then he said, "Okay, now we're gonna go home and we're gonna try my makgeolli, and you're gonna tell me what you think." And it was amazing. It was the best makgeolli that I had this whole trip, and I've never had it anywhere outside of Seoul. It was a Seoul specific experience, but who'd have thunk little blonde-haired, blue-eyed white boy from Central Illinois could brew Korean rice wine so well.
In a city the size of that.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of crazy times together. One that I put down is it's not every day you're sitting in a restaurant and people are feeding a kangaroo out the window.
That's
Remember
right.
that?
That was.
We saw so many kangaroos the last time down there. It was just incredible.
I think that would have been when we were in the Grampians National Park in the state of Victoria. Yeah.
Right. Now, when your sister was down there, we were so desperate to find a kangaroo. I think I took a picture of a dead one alongside the road. I did.
You did. I know you did.
And then we couldn't find any, and somebody said, just go over to the golf course. And sure enough, where they're watering the grass because it's so dry down there, they're just laying around lounging on the greens down there.
Yeah,
so,
we did see more than our fair share of kangaroos, and I definitely did as well. Yeah,
the Grampians were a lot of fun, and a lot of climbing, just a fun place. Wildlife, saw things.
They had alpacas there for some reason where we were staying. There were foxes running around. Yeah,
the foxes that got introduced that caused all the trouble down there.
That's right.
They get the alpacas just to kill the fox.
To combat the fox, infestation or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, that's right.
Just another thing that somebody introduced as a great idea. I think so they could go fox hunting.
That sounds right. I know that's what they did with rabbits, and that certainly backfired. Gosh, I don't know if that was in Australia or New Zealand. I want to say that was in Australia.
Australia,
well.
yeah.
Okay.
They've had a lot of things backfire. The toads, the cane toads. We do the same things here. We bring in something to wipe out some insect, and then we've caused more trouble than if we just left the insect there. I'm jumping all over the place on my notes. You've got tons of notes. You haven't even looked at them.
No.
If this thing goes down in flames, it's all on my shoulders, right?
That's right. You got to throw me a life raft. Yeah.
Okay, we covered homesickness, favorite places. I know, and I am going to go out on the edge. I think your favorite place of all was Japan.
I think I would have to say the same. I think I would say. Even though what? Sorry?
You were just there a short time.
Yeah, only 2 weeks in Japan, but gosh, I never had a dull moment when I was there. I knew it was going to be, it was very likely to be a once-in-a-lifetime experience for me, so I knew what I wanted to see, I knew where I wanted to go, and I really crammed it in, saw as much as I possibly could, and it was an incredible experience. I really wish that I would have had more time there. I really wish I would have had 3 weeks. You always wish you had more time when you take a trip like that. But I got to spent 4 or 5 days in Tokyo. I got to see Mount Fuji, and then I headed south to spend a little bit of time in Kyoto, the former capital of Japan, and Osaka as well, and just met some really cool people. God, it was so beautiful as well. I was there. That was in early November, so that was before it got cold. That was autumn, so not at the height of tourist season, but a very beautiful, excellent time to travel the country. I did have a great time there. So Japan was definitely one of my favorites.
You got to see the Hachiko?
Hachiko,
the most faithful dog in the world. I did that story on the air, but
okay, yeah.
That dog is famous in Japan. It's an icon.
Yeah, absolutely.
A dog that waited for its master that had died, waited for close to 10 years.
10 years, 9 or 10 years, yeah.
At a train station, yeah.
That's
so,
right.
You got
So, good boy, yeah.
Yeah, good doggy. Things you learned? I tell you what, you did learn a lot. Just logistically, way to get around in the world, metric system, communicating. How did you communicate in all these? You don't know all these languages.
No, I don't. I speak a little bit of Spanish, but I'm more than rusty as far as that's concerned. So, I'm very lucky and I'm spoiled. We're spoiled. All of us are spoiled because English is our native language and it's relatively easy. It's very easy to make your way around most other parts of the world. If you only speak one language, you're lucky that it's English because everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people in most of the countries that I visited speaks at least a little bit of English, if not incredible English. Some of the European countries I visited, shout out to my Dutch friends and my Swedish friends, they speak English better than I do, I would say. It's really incredible. They start learning it from such a young age. But in other countries, some countries, it was really helpful to. I got a lot of help from some friends that I had. When I was in the Netherlands, for example, my Dutch friends, they were speaking Dutch for me. And when I was in France, my French friends, they would organize things. They would handle some of the logistics in their native language, so I didn't have to worry about it too much. In other countries, Italy, for example, where I arrived in Italy, I didn't speak a word of Italian. You just do your best. I would advise anyone who wants to go to a foreign country and doesn't speak the language, learn a couple of phrases. Learn how to say hello. Learn how to say excuse me, and learn how to say do you speak English? Because the odds are they do. And if they see that you're making an effort to communicate in the local language, they're going to go easy on you. They did for me. And that's the best way to break your way into a foreign culture, I would say, without speaking the language.
It seemed like you told me you learned left and right. in a lot of, so, you know.
Yeah,
I
spent a lot of my time asking for directions, so I did learn how to say left and right in several other languages. Yeah, French and German and Spanish and Italian, I think. Yeah.
I thought you might pick Australia as your favorite of all those travels, but
boy, I really love the city of Melbourne. That was home away from home for me more than anything else.
Very strange there. Graffiti. Everything is every building is graffitied. It's like art.
Melbourne is it's famous. Well, it's famous for two things at least. Probably more than I'm thinking of right now. But I mean, two things that I knew about it before I ever arrived was street art. Lots of incredible street artists down there, and street artists doing commission works for the size of buildings and for apartment complexes and all that, and just good old fashioned graffiti as well. And the other thing I would say is coffee. Melbourne's reputation for being coffee lovers preceded it. You know, I knew all about that before I arrived down there. And they are not kidding. They definitely have some of the best coffee in the world, if not the best coffee in the world.
You knew all the secret ones. You knew the magic.
Yeah, that's true.
You got to be a barista to get one of those. I think they card you on that. You got to love a city, Melbourne, where you can go to a George Costanza Seinfeld bar.
That's right, George's bar. George's bar was, it was a great hangout. And I don't know, is there a photo on the website of us in front of the George Costanza mural? Maybe not. But
I think it's a close-up.
I have one. I have one of us in front of a scantily clad George Costanza.
George Costanza. Anybody that's watched Seinfeld will know exactly what that picture is from. But we had.
The key word is tasteful.
Yeah, tasteful, tasteful. Journals. You say you kept journals the whole time.
Yeah, I did. I tried to. I definitely kept journals for the first maybe 3 months of my travels, but I would have to say I started to fall off the wagon a little bit. You get busy, you start working, you lose track of some of the ambitions that you had, like writing a journal entry every day, for example. If I had a journal entry for every day from the last 5 years and 3 months, I don't know if I would know what to do with them.
How about photos, though?
Yep, I took my fair share of photographs.
I asked you to give me an estimate, so you did.
I had to flip through my pictures folder on my laptop here before I came down, just so I knew what I was working with. And it over the course of 5 years, it turned out to be about 13,000 photographs that I took.
And we are going to describe each one at a time, starting right now.
From the top, here we go.
Here we go. About 50 a week.
Yeah, that was about the average that it worked out to for 5 years, 50 photographs for 5 weeks. But 3,000 of those were in the last 8 weeks during my trip to Japan and when I was traveling Europe and stuff, in places I didn't know if I was ever going to get back to again. They were very much once in a lifetime experiences. So hey, I'm going to take a lot of photographs.
You were gone long enough to trash one camera with sand and broken and everything else. So you ended up with a phone taking most of your photos. Is that correct?
Yeah, and when I hit the road for the last time, I still had my digital camera, and I was planning to take photographs with it until I realized that I had a smartphone with a more capable camera than my camera. So I decided it was on its last legs anyway. I'm gonna chuck that camera away and just rely on my smartphone like the rest of Americans do, and the rest of the world more or less. I think at this point.
I got a couple things in here I want to get to. I know we'll wind up running out of time, but. Did you run into any places that really look down on Americans? Excess Americans, they got everything. Did anybody really get down on you for being from America?
Absolutely not. And I was surprised at that fact. I had anticipated, catching a little bit of flack for being an American and for being, the stereotypes about Americans that were boisterous and loud and crass and belligerent or whatever, or selfish. And, but as an American, I was treated just as well as anyone else. No one ever looked down on me. No, I think because when you meet someone face to face, stereotypes really kind of go out the window, I would have to say. Stereotypes are useful for thinking about, a country as a whole or some country on the other side of the world. You think, they're a useful way to think about a population as a whole. But when you meet someone face to face, you're not going to rely on stereotypes. You're going to get to know them as an individual. And so people treated me that way. I treated them that way. They wouldn't reduce me to American stereotypes. They'd want to get to know me as an American. And some of them, I had a couple of them say to me along the way, you're not so bad for an American. Maybe Americans aren't so bad. And I took that as a compliment, because whether I wanted to be or not, I was, I'm representing for my home country. I was the only American that a couple of people probably met along the road in places like New Zealand. I don't know if, we're not real common down there as well. I was a bit of a novelty. You know, there's a fair bit of Canadians down there, but not too many Americans, believe it or not.
Plus, a lot of the people that you ran into, they were in the same boat as you, looking for work or looking for a place to stay, or, you know, a lot of your friends. But everybody that I met on the road, super nice to me. So I just thought maybe being there for a long time, people might have kind of stereotyped you, but you say you never...
No. I'd say the more time that I spent with people, the less that, you know, the more they got to know me as an individual, and the more they would treat me as such. That's one of the biggest things that I learned being abroad for so long, and one of the biggest things I was surprised about is how easy it was, at least for me, to get along with people from all these disparate cultures that I had nothing in common with. How easy it was for me to get along with Kiwis and Australians and Canadians and Germans and Swedes and Dutch people. You know, we all come from incredibly different backgrounds, but I suppose part of that is the fact that we, as you said, we were all on the road. We're all trying to do the same thing. We're all living in a foreign country, trying to survive. So we have that in common, but I was really taken aback at how easy it was to get along with people from incredibly foreign cultures. And even in places like Malaysia and Singapore and Indonesia, people treated me very well. You know, I never felt alienated. I never felt looked down upon. You know, in some places I was treated like a celebrity. You know, people in Malaysia, I'll never forget. I walked into a shop. I was with my friend Doug, and we were walking around this market. And you know, one of the local guys selling some produce or something, he said, "Oh, you know, where are you from?" You know, we said, "America." You know, he said, his response was, "Oh, America, Hollywood, celebrity, welcome." You know, he was just excited to have some Americans around because, you know, a lot of Americans don't travel too much, and a lot of Americans don't travel to small villages in Malaysia. So that was really interesting for that guy to see, and he treated us incredibly well because of it. And yeah, the same I would have to say is true in throughout Europe. You know, the French are not rude. That's our stereotype. But a lot of friends that I met along the road, you know, I met a lot of, as I said, I met a lot of Germans, I met a lot of Dutch people, I met a lot of Swedes, and I met a lot of French people. And God, they're just some of the loveliest people I've ever met in my life. And a lot of my good friends to this day are French and living in France. And you know, don't rely on stereotypes if you don't have to. Go and check out a place for yourself, and that's the way to really judge it.
Roughest country you visited, or least favorite? Let's put it that way.
Boy, I hate to talk bad about a place, you know.
Right. But we're ranking.
I was privileged to experience all these cultures, you know. But yeah. You know, the biggest disappointment for me, I would have to say, probably Italy let me down a little bit. Part of that is because, you know, it's definitely it's a summer country. I would say go there, and you know, you want to visit Tuscany, go in the summertime. You want to visit Venice, go in the summertime when the sun's shining down on you. I went there in November. It was a little bit rainy. You know, it just didn't live up to my expectations. But you know, I can't always blame the location for that. My timing wasn't so great. You know, I thought I was gonna get robbed, but I didn't. But I didn't, so I guess that's a plus. Yeah, you know, I don't know.
If you had it to do all over again, would you change anything? Got any regrets? It's a long time on the road.
Yeah, you know, I think I really did the best that I could with the knowledge that I had at the time and the resources that I had. I think I did the best that I could, and I don't know if I would really change anything or do it differently, apart from maybe I would maybe take more risks. I would maybe...
I don't know. I saw some of those pictures. You took plenty of risks.
Maybe, but...
I know.
No, just in terms of taking trips, or you know, taking side trips, or going camping, or tagging along with some people that I don't know so well for an impromptu trip somewhere. You know, most of the times that I took risks, they worked out to my benefit, and you know, there were some of the best experiences. Tasmania, for example, was one of the. We talked about that a bit earlier, and I mentioned that I love Tasmania. I went to Tasmania completely on a whim. I had no plans. Nothing on my itinerary for Tasmania. I just happened to catch a cheap flight from Melbourne and decided, hey, why not go? I had a week free, so I'm going to hop down to Tasmania. Just happened to run into a couple of Americans in my hostel and another one of their friends who was Spanish. And they said, hey, we're going to rent a car for a couple of days. Why don't you hop along with us? And we ended up spending 4 days on the road, camping, whale watching, hiking, eating lunch on the beach, just having some incredible experiences in Tasmania. So that was a risk that I took that ultimately paid off. And if you take a risk and it doesn't pay off, you don't make any friends, it rains all week, you're more or less in the same position you were in before. You're somewhere where, it's not the best place to be and you're not having the most fun you can be, but at least you tried. So I would say I would take more risks, be a little bit more adventurous, not be so shy.
That's a lesson I learned while I was out of the country in the Navy. Don't be practical sometimes. Just go. And I would hang back sometimes, and then you regret it, So, yeah. Somebody thinking about doing the exact same thing that you're doing, got any advice? Take a boatload of money?
Yeah, well, that never hurts. If that's an option, absolutely go for it. As you mentioned, the rule of thumb is take twice as much money and half as much stuff. Travel light. I learned to travel light along the way. I thought I was traveling light, and then I wound up ditching an entire duffel bag full of stuff that I decided I didn't need. So definitely travel light. And don't worry so much. There's such a thing as over-preparing. I definitely over-prepared in terms of what I was going to do, where I was going to go when I arrived in Australia. Sometimes you just want to fly by the seat of your pants, so to speak, and sometimes that's the best way to do it. Travel light. If you've got a lot of things, you got a lot of possessions that you need to worry about and need to look after back home. If you really want to travel, you're serious about traveling, and you want to do it for a long period of time, then sell them. Money's a lot more useful anyway, and it's easier to carry around with you.
I need you to hang around the house and start helping me get rid of stuff. You're pretty good about that.
I can do that. Just how's 20% sound?
Yeah, okay. Plus, if I remember correctly, you still have stuff on a slow boat being shipped home. How long has it been at sea now?
Let's see. I've got some stuff coming from Florence, Italy. Yeah, and that's ship that out towards the end of November. That could be another month off still. I believe 3 months is what they told me that might take. So.
I'm getting close. I'm getting down to the very biggest, most important questions. What do you got? You wanna throw anything out there? You got any? I'm going to throw a couple shout outs here while you're thinking about it. I'm going to throw a big shout out to my Navy buddies that are probably listening tonight. Greg Wazinski down in Temple, Texas. Mike Doc Blanchard might be listening out in California. Barry and Julie and Trevor Rocky over down under. A couple of great friends that I hope to get back to see someday. So a few shout outs. Hey, how about a shout out to Gail?
Hi, Mom.
Yeah. And Anna might be listening, your sister. I'm not sure if Joe is listening, but if he is, hey, big shout out there.
Hey, big sis. I bet the nephews are in bed. Oh, they might still be hanging out.
They're going to be beating up on Jim here all next week.
Yeah, that's true. I can't wait.
Going in to do a little babysitting. So, you got anything else?
Not really. Boy, I don't know. You asked me about some of my favorite experiences. Really, road tripping around New Zealand was one of them. I would say that was a highlight for me. Japan is definitely one of the favorite places I visited. Snorkeling in Malaysia is one thing I didn't get to mention. I spent about, I think it was $8 to do 6 hours on various coral reefs snorkeling in Malaysia.
Wow.
That was an
amazing
you
said
experience.
That was probably the most inexpensive place you went, wasn't it?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah. I didn't make it to Thailand or Cambodia or Laos. Those are all meant to be really inexpensive as well. So great vacation spots, especially Thailand, people say, but I can't speak to that one myself.
Right. If I started going on favorite places, we would be here all night. Fantastic. Australia and New Zealand. I would always go back to Australia because I'm done with the big cities now. I've seen plenty. I would go... I would travel the coast. I would head out to Perth. I would head out into the outback. I've been to Sydney, 3 times now. Love the place. I'd go back for the fireworks off the bridge. But, I would head for the road less traveled, the little bars, the little, backwoods, outback, find the people, friendly people out there. So, and he was never seen or heard from again, right, as I headed out into the outback.
Well, if you want to disappear forever, the outback of Australia is a pretty good place to do it.
Right. So, did you ever think you'd be sitting in a radio station in Erie being interviewed by your old man?
By my old man. I never saw my old man being a DJ. No, I can't say that.
Well, I may be arrested for impersonating a DJ. I'm still working on it.
Yeah,
but
keep up the good work. You got a loyal fan base, I believe. Uncle Tim's show is on the up and up. So.
And I gotta believe this is the break that is going to launch you into stardom.
Oh, we can only hope.
You going to write a book about your adventures or just stick with the journals?
No plans to write a book as of yet.
You could.
I don't know if anyone's interested in reading about my experiences as much as I am about telling them. I don't know. Well, decision forthcoming.
You're a classic example of what I say on this show all the time. uh, don't give up on your dreams. Don't put it off. We get one go around here in this life, and if you got a chance to do something, and I'm quite proud of you for taking that chance and for getting out the door. Now you've moved home for good, right?
That's a good one.
I don't know that Erie is going to live up to what you want to do the rest of your life. But,
I don't think it necessarily will, but it's nice to come back, reconnect with your roots a little bit. I had a couple of nephews I wanted to say hello to, so Danny, Michael, and Dylan, what's up? Happy to be your uncle. It's really cool to hang out with you guys from time to time. My sister and brother, mom and dad are all right here. That's great. Great to reconnect with family a little bit. Most of them thought I had disappeared off the face of the earth forever, but that is not the case. I do think I'll do some more traveling. I thought that was a question you might ask me.
That's right. Where would you go?
Do you want to get back out there? And I would say it's not a question of if, but when. I spent 5 weeks in Europe, and I feel like I barely scratched the surface. It was my first trip there, so I wanted to hit all the highlights. I did Berlin and Paris and Barcelona and Rome and Amsterdam and all of those places, but I just barely scratched the surface, I would say, and saw all the touristy sites. I'd really love to go back and spend a little bit more time there, see all the things that I missed. Like I said, not a question of if, but when. I do plan to go back and. There's plenty of other places that I still haven't been that I'd love to check out. I'd love to make my way down to South America one day. So we'll see. Dust off those Spanish skills. We'll see.
That's right. I'd like to see a map and dotted lines of every place you've been. Crisscrossing around. That'd be interesting. But,
my friend pointed out to me right about the time that I left. He said, "Oh, it turns out you've literally flown around the globe, flown around the world." And I guess that's true. Flew across the Pacific from L.A. to Brisbane. And then I flew back around the Atlantic to get home from Europe. So, hey, I've flown around the world. I haven't seen every place there is to offer in the world, but I have flown my way around it. So,
well, you've been 10,000 miles from Erie, so that's saying something.
Well, that was always my goal.
So, well, I tell you what, we could talk all night, but it's been great having you stop in here. I know you were just a little bit apprehensive about coming in here, but
that's my first radio interview. I don't know what to expect. So I hope we didn't bore you to tears. Yeah, we were out there and listening to the Uncle Tim show. Thanks for listening.
Yep, appreciate having Jim in here, and hope you didn't get too bored. I'll tell you what, get those airline tickets. Get your backpack. I forgot. I was going to ask you one other thing. What kind of music you listening to on your iPod? I bet you and I are just a little bit different.
I'm a rap and hip hop guy these days. So
I was going to switch format to all rap, but I just haven't done it yet. So
anyway, pleasure and an honor to be here. Keep doing what you do.
All right. Glad you stopped in here. Any final words, or are you booking out the door? I think have we wrapped it up?
I think we pretty well wrapped it up. I'm running out of things to say, so.
And I'm not gonna go back through the 5 sheets of paper I got here just in case.
No, don't do it. I don't think I've got too many other friends listening, but my friends in Europe, Robin and Maggie, my Dutch friends, if they're listening, hey, what's up? Alex and Teresa over in France. They're some of my best friends. Sarah up in Manchester in the UK. I'd like to say hi to them. If my boy Doug is listening, half this interview has been about him, so he knows I'm.
That's right. You better be brewing me something up there, Doug. Well, anyway, one nice thing: if you do hit the road again, you got contacts all over the place.
And don't think I won't take advantage of that, because I definitely will. I plan to. So.
All right. Well, thanks once again, Jim. We're turning off the old microphone. I'm going to throw on a song. Hope we didn't bore you too bad. Stick around. Stick around. Got a couple hours of show left. We'll try to get as much accomplished as we can. Be right back.